Derek Lunsford may have technically won the 2025 Mr. Olympia, but if you look at the scorecards and if you know what happened on night 2 of the show, you would know that this is just bullshit. At night 1, pre-judging, Derek showed up at his biggest ever, but the condition was not at its all-time best. Still, it was passable. Night 1 was decent enough by Derek standards. However, at night 2, he dropped the ball from an already mediocre physique on night 1, and the scorecards kinda showed this, but not to the full extent. In the top 2 between him and Hottie managed to win night 2, but it was strange. Derek lost night 2 by less than Hottie lost night 1. That just doesn't make any sense. Hottie pummeled that twerp at finals, and I don't think he's the only one that beat Derek night 2. I think someone that was extremely underrated night 2 was Nick Walker. Now this is part 2 to a video I did yesterday where I tried to explain what happened to Nick and why he got 6th. Well, in that video I admitted that yeah, night 1 was not a good look for him, but finals was a lot better and it deserved a better look from the judges. But they were too busy beating Derek off to notice that Nick made significant improvements, and really he should have been first call out. Honestly, he should have beaten Derek at finals. But Nick didn't even get that comparison. Because the problem is, if Nick did beat Derek, that means a lot of other people would have done so too. Which means that had the judges actually judged finals properly, Derek would have fallen too much in the total amount of points and he would have been beaten by Hottie and or Andrew. I can't stand for this though. On this channel, I prefer to actually open my eyes to what's in front of me and judge physiques. So today we are going to compare Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford, both from the 2025 Mr. Olympia and both at finals. I think depending on who wins this matchup, we can infer a lot of things about the Olympia. Is Nick Walker being robbed at these bigger events? Is Derek Lunsford getting a pass? And just what the hell is going on with the judging at the Mr. Olympia? Anyway, we have a heated discussion to get into today, so let's start the video. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Now for this video, I'm going to use a couple of sets of photos, mainly from Stage Time Photo on Instagram. He puts out some great stuff, he's really underrated, give him a follow for sure. The photos he puts out are edited, but not as heavily as my other options. And I'm not going to mix the photo sets in this video. Oftentimes these photographers are using similar presets, so I want to keep the type of editing the same. That way it should affect each athlete in the same ways. I try to keep everything as consistent as possible. Anyway, in our first pose, the front double, let's start with the bad things, and let me tell you about the worst thing I noticed on each guy. For Derek, it's the lack of detail, hardness, and just the overall level of condition. For Nick, it's his legs. They were a bit downsized at this event, but to be fair, this angle doesn't help his case. However, while they both have some issues, I don't think Derek really makes up for his flaws. For one, Nick completely exploits Derek's main weakness. Nick looks like he's made of granite on his own, but next to Doughboy Derek, he looks even better because the contrast is so crazy. Overall, Nick kicks Derek's ass upstairs. I get why some people may prefer a vacuum, it's hard not to, but I've always said that, at least to me, a great set of abs beats a great vacuum. Derek is no loser, but I actually prefer Nick in the midsection, or at least the abs I should say. I actually prefer him in the lats too when we consider them standalone. Overall, Derek does have the better torso shape, but Nick wins each element on their own. That's kind of his entire MO. Outside of the quads, he pretty much has top 3 body parts across the board. But the way they come together on his own physique does leave some to be desired. Anyway, back to it, Nick rounds out his streak of upper body wins with the biggest one in the arms. I know the arms aren't everything, even in the front double biceps pose, but this is just embarrassing. I've showed this top 4 photo before, but I'll show it again. Derek had the worst arms of the top 4 and it wasn't even close. They just look inflamed and sad. And it goes without saying that Nick is better many times over. Really, I don't think we've seen a worse set of arms on an Olympia champion since 1997, or at least post-tear Dorian Yates at large. And at least he had an injury as an excuse. Derek just sucks. Now of course, Derek does have the better quads compared to Nick. Well, I will say he has the bigger quads. They have better sweep and are more balanced with his physique. But even down here, Nick schools him in terms of detail and separation. So Nick still has a silver lining down here at least. I wanted to give Nick a better shot here to present his legs, so here's another set of photos, this time from Gannicus Original on Instagram. As you can see here, when the camera is closer to being head on, his legs actually do have decent sweep. Again, he's not winning, but he holds it down a lot better here than Derek does upstairs. Derek is just completely outclassed. And I have to mention, some of you will have something to say about the sizing on this one. But no, I promise you Derek is just that small, so what is he not losing? He wins shape for sure, I'll give him that, but this is still bodybuilding. And in terms of overall size, completeness, and condition, he's getting bitch made. I'll still keep this as a narrow win because I know there are going to be guys out there that have to have a girly waist in their front doubles to get them off, but Nick is still going to take the win here. For obvious reasons, Nick never hits the front lat spread, so it was slim pickings when trying to find a vid or photo for this pose. And since I'm a Derek hater, if I ever ran into trouble finding matching photos for this comparison, I went to the photos from prejudging like you see here. If anything, this benefits Derek immensely. Nick was not that good at prejudging, and Derek was a lot better than he was at finals. I will give him credit for that. But anyway, what is there to really say about this pose? I mean, I personally wouldn't give Derek 4 points. I think Nick's pose is just good enough now that he doesn't get swept, especially by someone like Derek who just isn't that good. And again, just look how small Derek is. What is Nick? 5'8" at the most? Probably 5'7"? What does that make Derek? Probably 5'4" at best. I'm just mentioning this because I know some people will say I sized Derek too small, but now you don't have to trust me, just look. He's the smallest of the 3 guys here, clearly smaller than Nick. And for that reason alone, you can make an argument that Nick doesn't deserve to get swept. But I want to give Derek every reasonable advantage I can give him, so I'm going to give him the full margin here. In my comparisons, I use a 2, 3, and 4 point system, which are used for small, medium, and large wins respectively. We're going to keep Nick's win in the front double at a narrow 2-pointer, but I'll go ahead and give Derek 4 points here. Again, I might do 3 personally. Nick does win a couple of things, but even then, it's either 3 or 4 points for Derek. No one is going to argue 2. So I'll go ahead and give him the best case scenario and 4 points. Now this pose is quite a tough one. In the side chest, I might personally side with Nick, but I do think Derek does enough to win here. Legitimately, it is close though. I'm pleased to say that these are both great poses. Nick looks like a tank. He's bigger overall, probably more complete top to bottom, and more conditioned. But his one weakness is the one area Derek beats him in, and it's the most important area. It's the chest. Derek from the side actually has decent pecs. In no other angle, even the other side pose to his pecs look as good as they do here. But here, they're full and decently detailed. And from the side, he holds up pretty well with Nick. He brings a great side leg and a very full arm and delt, and of course that win of the pecs. So overall he puts up a good fight everywhere, but the pecs he just outright wins. For Nick it's the opposite. The chest lacks a little, but everything else is crazy. There's an argument to be found in each guy, but I think Derek is a little more objective because he does win the namesake of the pose. It's close, but again, the golden rule in the IFBB is, when in doubt, give it to Derek. Let me just rip off the band-aid for the 2 remaining Derek fans out there. Nick Walker had the best back poses in the entire event. This is actually the more narrow one of the 2, but even then I think this is surprisingly kind of obvious. The only thing that's better on Derek are his glutes, and it's really just because of his neat and clean striations. Genetically, Nick doesn't have those etched in lines, but if you look, he is clearly shredded. As a whole, he most definitely wins the entire lower half between the quad sweep and the thick hamstrings, so Derek's one silver lining doesn't go without being checked by Nick. Anyway, after that win of the glutes, Nick takes everything else. We've already discussed the lower body, but the back is the same way. Derek has great thickness and width to the upper back, but this time around his back was not as sharp. It borrowed the same kind of blurry, puffy look from his front side. Nick is thick through the upper back and a lot more separated, and then the lats and lower back region is soundly in his camp. He really filled in that mid portion of the back at this show, and although Derek has a good Christmas tree, I prefer Nick for the sheer amount of thick muscle he's packed into this region. And finally, in true Nick Walker fashion, he also takes the arms and delts mainly for the better separation, but the better bicep peaks help too. Overall, with his top to bottom wins, I think this could potentially be pushed to a 3-point win for Nick, believe it or not. But I think this is one pose where playing it safe is actually the right move. In the whole IFBB, these 2 guys are at the very top in this pose, and after that you get a little bit of a drop off, then guys like Tonio, Beirut, Martin, and Regan, and then after that there's an incredibly steep drop off. So I think it feels really weird to give Nick a 3-point win because in the grand scheme of things, they're a lot closer to each other than anyone else is to them. And really, I think I'm being a bit hyperbolic. This pose can still be slightly obvious, but close, so Nick will get 2 points, but this isn't to be understated. He beats Derek Lunsford in the rear double, and that's impressive in and of itself regardless of the margin. For the second back pose, we once again have to resort to a call-out pick, but again, this is prejudging, so it should help Derek if anything, but I just don't think it matters. No amount of different photos or editing aside from just actual Photoshop can stop Derek from looking so small. In fact, I knew some of you would want to believe that I altered this photo in some way to make Derek look smaller, so I kept Martin in to add some more credibility, but you can just go ahead and check the photos for yourself. Check out the Instagram account I took these photos from. You'll find that the photo is cropped, but that's it. Derek is center stage too, so if anything, he should look bigger. But no, he is actually that small, and with that goes pretty much any argument for him to win. It sure as hell can't be off of width. He's way too small to stand next to Martin, let alone Nick. Again, the only thing Derek wins are the glutes, and everywhere else he's completely destroyed on size alone. But even with this bad photo, we can see that Nick is still clearly more conditioned and separated. I shied away from a 3-point win for Nick in the first back pose, but Derek is completely out of his depth here, which is crazy to say because a lot of people think he has the best back in the world. Really, with that brutal size difference on top top of the brutal condition difference, you could consider making this 4 points. Legitimately, it looks like they're competing in 2 separate divisions. I'll make it 3 points because Derek does look great on his own and against guys that are smaller, but Nick, hell, even Martin too, they both make him look like a boy amongst men. Sorry to do it again, but we have to use another prejudging photo for the side tricep. It's honestly getting a bit ridiculous and hilarious though. Derek still sucks. He's small, blurry, and just mediocre. That size difference is brutal, we don't have to discuss that. But what's even more brutal is the condition level. There are more lines in Nick's side leg, the pecs have actual hardness to them, and the midsection of all things is actually a blowout in Nick's favor. So all in all, Nick wins the abs, the side leg, I'd give him the tricep too. All of this is sounding like a 3-point win to me. Derek has a lot of width to this pose, the side leg is a highlight as always, and the tricep is decent, so on his own he has good things going for him, but against Nick he is clearly outmassed and outclassed. Again, we do have another call out photo to use for the abs and thighs, sorry not sorry. I know that's 3 in a row now, but what's utterly hilarious is that Derek is 0 for 3, even with the advantage, and he doesn't even win this one. Now with these call out photos, they do end up blurring the details, but if you're in great condition, it shouldn't be the biggest issue because those details will still be etched in. But you'll notice that only one of these guys would have an issue with the photo quality, and of course it's low def Derek. Nick really lacks taper, even with his best versions he kind of struggles in this aspect, but here he's pretty fridge like I must say, but what is there to say about Derek? This pose is just f***ed up. Melting abs and smooth quads, I mean that's not exactly a winning combo there. He might technically win the quads on size, but Nick still beats him in terms of condition, and he most certainly wins the abs for that reason as well. I wanted to provide a little more concrete evidence for this pose, so here are some screenshots, but this time each guy is actually from finals. I think Derek would rather have me just move on because not only does this not help his case, but I think it makes him look even worse. But all in all, it is just a better photo, so I guess it just shows what was already there, and it's really nothing. Again, he has smooth quads and just a really messy set of abs. Nick doesn't look as sharp in the legs here, but I do want to note that both guys are blurrier looking than they actually are. And that is because of that top tier live stream quality we are treated to every year by the gracious Olympia production team. But really, it's like the first photo. Nick still looks way more cut than Derek, and if anything, the bad photo helps his case. He looks good, great even, despite bad photo quality. And the abs just seal the deal. It's no contest. The taper is still rough for Nick, but the abs are even worse on Derek's end. Now, usually with some of Nick's more streamlined versions, I would make this a 3-point win for him, but today, because this version's taper is so bad, I'll play it safe. Not only is the taper bad, but the legs might go to Derek still because they're just bigger, but that's questionable. And finally, we have the last pose, the most muscular. Now on the surface, when he has these filters making him look half decent, this pose appears to be closer and Derek appears to be doing alright. He's pretty wide for his height and he was at his biggest at this event, so he's carrying a lot of size on that small frame too. But beneath the surface, he's not only still losing the overall size debate, but certainly the quality debate as well. I'll give him the quads over Nick. They've always looked better here compared to his other poses for Derek, but everything else goes to Nick because either he's more ripped, bigger, or both. He has the sharper, blockier abs, more hardness to the chest, and he is much bigger and harder in the arms and delts. And overall, he's just a tank. I got one more picture for the road here. I included this because it just pretty much describes the whole thing about this Derek versus Nick comparison. It's a brightened screenshot from the live stream at prejudging, but even here with Derek having the advantage, the difference is stark. He looks melted and small. Nick does have the angle to be fair, but no one is going to argue that he's the much bigger guy and he's as hard as nails. Even with this shitty footage, we can see that. Honestly, I could give Nick 3 points after taking a look at this pic, but if you couldn't tell already, a theme of this video is to give Derek the benefit of the doubt time and time again. So for our final pose, I'll do just that and limit Nick's margin to just 2 points. Next, we have the second round of judging, which consists of the 4 overall physique categories, which include muscularity, condition, shape, and flaws. Let's start with muscularity. Now, Derek brought his biggest version ever to this year's Olympia. But with that said, every time we saw him right next to Nick, he still looked really small. Those call-out photos were really eye-opening. And overall, Nick is still more complete top to bottom, front to back. The only area Derek was bigger in was the quads. I honestly want to make it 3 points if that's the only thing Derek was winning, but we'll stick with 2 points. But I am in fact going to have to use that 3-point margin when it comes to the overall condition category. Really, Nick could be taking 4 points here. Remember, we're still just considering the finals versions only. And on that night too, Derek lost any details and separation he managed to wring out on night 1. At finals, there was just nothing going on outside of the glutes. It's funny that that is the one area on Derek that is shredded, but everything else looked melted. Against Nick, he looked even worse, especially on night 2. Against Nick, Derek looked even worse because Nick, especially on night 2, was hard as nails and looked to be carved out of granite. So he definitely takes a 3-pointer here. Then we we have shape, and yes, Derek is going to win this one, I'm not even going to argue it, I'm actually going to give him the full 4 points. If shape is so important, then this should be all he needs to win this comparison, but you'll see how that turns out. I just don't want it to look like I'm downplaying shape and aesthetics at all, so Derek can have the 4 points here. I'm not even going to stop there. In the final category, the flaws section, I'm giving Derek another 3 points just for Nick Walker having a stomach at times. That horrible footage that was floating around of Nick was from night 1, where he clearly didn't give a f anymore because he knew he was screwed, so he was just letting it hang out. But even in this night 2 comparison, I will still count it as a flaw. Again, I don't want it to seem like I'm downplaying Nick's shortcomings, so I'm going to overrepresent them if anything. So Derek takes a massive 7-point win over our final 2 categories. Alright, now it's time to reveal the final scores. Now remember, this was just a finals comparison. I want to mention that again. We'll talk about what it means for the overall scores and placings at this year's Olympia and what they should have been, but for now, this comparison was just about finals versions, so I'm only commenting on that for now. But regardless, this was eye-opening. Winning this comparison with 59.6 points was Nick Walker. Derek Lunsford wasn't too far behind, but still, he only scored 40.4 points. This was honestly Derek's best case scenario too. I walked back pretty much every one of Nick Walker's wins in this matchup to try and play devil's advocate for Derek and mitigate some of my bias. But even then, it wasn't enough. A 60-40 split isn't the widest of margins, but for my comparisons, it falls just into what I'd call a solid win territory. And again, Nick probably should have done better if we were scoring fairly. I mean, honestly, this Derek, the version he brought to finals, was so bad that even prejudging Nick Walker might be able to beat it. Now, the first thing Derek's fans would say if he had them would be something about his shape. Does he have better shape than Nick? Sure, no one is arguing that. But did it matter enough for Derek to win? Absolutely not. Remember, we gave him huge wins in the overall categories section. Nick hemorrhaged a total of 7 points off pretty much just one issue, his poor shape. But even when we gave Derek more than he deserves, it's still not enough for him to win. So you can't even say that I'm not considering shape enough. I made it way more influential than it should have been. Nick's loss in the overall physique categories from that one issue was actually worth 22% of the total points in this matchup. So Derek claimed almost a fifth of this comparison just from having better shape alone. But again, it just doesn't matter. Plainly put, Nick just has more going for him. He was a lot more muscular, more complete, and far more conditioned. Honestly, Derek's loss in condition was pretty much just as brutal as Nick's loss in shape. Derek was a soft, pudgy mess at finals. But with Nick having the superior condition, muscularity, and completeness, these things were able to lead him to big wins in the first round of judging. He won the mandatory 6-2, and again, we still watered down all of his wins. But he was still able to win that first round easily and even held it together in the overall categories because muscularity and condition do actually matter. This is in fact open bodybuilding. So while shape is important, that's not all you can be bringing. Derek gets his ass handed to him on every other metric against Nick. Derek had issues too, may I remind you of the arms? Even his lats are very sus. Not only was his condition pretty bad, but every time we saw him actually standing next to Nick, he looked like a child. With all that said, what gives? This is so obvious, so why did Derek place so far ahead of Nick, even at finals? What's even funnier than the overall outcome is the specifics of it. If you look at the scorecard, you'll see that Derek, even though he got a lot worse at finals, only lost 2 points from night 1. Nick, on the other hand, with his great improvements, actually lost a point. I mean, come on. And like I said at the very beginning, Nick is not the only one that beat Derek on night 2. Really, a lot of people should have, so don't think I'm just trying to go to bat for Nick. This video is more about Derek than anyone. But on night 2, I think both Andrew and Hottie should have beat him easily. Thankfully, Hottie did, but not by enough. Funny how that works. But on top of those two guys, there's a case for Martin and obviously Nick to beat finals Derek as well. I hate to say it, but maybe even Samson had an argument, but he got a gift too if you ask me, so I'll leave it at that. So if all of these people should have beat Derek, why did he not lose the points? Why did Nick Walker lose a point even though he did the opposite of Derek and drastically improved for night 2? Well, here's the main problem. Martin and Nick didn't even get a chance to be compared to Derek night 2. They were never put next to him, not even in the same call-out. Derek was protected the entire time. Now, I talked more in depth about this issue in part 1 of my video, but the TLDR is, the IFBB is often lazy when it comes to judging, and they clearly wanted to protect Derek. The judges didn't give guys a chance to move up and be compared to other guys, nor did they want other guys to lose that they had going for them in pre-judging, so the call-outs we got on night 2 were the exact same as what we got on night 1. And wouldn't you know, Derek stayed in the exact same position for the entire event. In the middle of first first call out. Hell, they barely gave Andrew a chance in the middle and he was in the same call out. But clearly the judges were hoping that the lack of proper comparisons would make Derek look better. But make no mistake, Nick was thoroughly kicking Derek's ass at finals and we saw that today. Had I put Martin in this comparison, he would have been the winner too. Same for Andrew and same for Hottie. This is why I wanted to do this comparison. Yes, it's a follow-up to the Nick video I did yesterday, but it just adds more evidence to the mounting case against Derek's second Olympia win. If they really compared Derek fairly and against everyone he should have been compared to, he would have lost finals clearly. Never mind prejudging, which I didn't have him winning anyway, but let's say he still wins prejudging in this case. At finals, with proper comparisons and judging, Derek would have lost too many points to rally for first. So it is very clear what is going on. Now, I don't know if Nick would have placed ahead of Derek overall. They both had a bad night at the show, but with that said, if they both sucked for half of the show, shouldn't they be a lot closer together in placings? The answer is a resounding yes. But what we saw today, Nick's thorough domination of Derek's finals physique, that just cannot be debated. Nick may not have won like many people were predicting, however, he still clocks in time and time again to prove that Derek's wins, including the one at the 2025 Mr. Olympia, was utter horseshit. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Would you guys have Nick beating Derek at finals, and where do you think these guys should have placed overall with better judging? Leave me your thoughts down in the comments. And if you guys like this video and want to see more, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more, and go and watch part 1 to this video if you haven't already. And if you guys want to get your hands on some high quality supplements while supporting my channel even further, head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, be sure to use my code PROJECT10 to get 10% off your entire order. That's code PROJECT10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.